Hello there. I'm Dave Myers, and you're listening to Verse by Verse. When in a discussion with others over matters of opinion, I've often teased by saying, well, you're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to be right. While this is said in jest, I have to admit that I want to be right. I don't think anyone wants to be wrong. I want the beliefs I hold to be true, not false or uninformed or ignorant. And that desire led me to examine the most important of all beliefs, my beliefs about God and the Bible. It seems that many people have never really thought to examine what they believe about God and why they believe it. Many often just seem to accept what they've been taught without really questioning it. Often it takes another person challenging their ideas for a person to really consider what they believe and why. While this can be true in any area of life, none is more important than in our religious beliefs. Why? Well, because it should be that our religious beliefs determine the values we hold, how we'll live this life of ours, how we'll treat others, and most importantly, how we will relate to God Himself. So in this short podcast, I'd like to challenge your religious assumptions. For example, God's Word tells us we should be keeping the Sabbath on Saturday, not Sunday. It tells us that Christmas doesn't celebrate Jesus' birth. It tells us Easter doesn't celebrate Christ's resurrection. In fact, it tells us that Christ was not resurrected on a Sunday morning at all. It tells us there are annual holy days that God commands us to keep, like the days of unleavened bread or the Feast of Trumpets. It tells us that the dead are asleep, not alive in heaven or hell. It tells us that God calls some things people eat unclean. While those things were created for a good purpose, they're not to be eaten as human food. Now in Acts chapter 17, the people in Berea were challenged in a similar way by Paul as he told them that their religious assumptions were incorrect and that they needed to change both those ideas and change themselves. In verse 11 of Acts chapter 17, we read, "These Bereans were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness and searched the Scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so." These Bereans were fair-minded. How so? They did not reject the statements Paul made just because what he was saying didn't match with their own religious opinion. Rather, it says they, quote, "searched the Scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so," end quote. The Bereans were fair-minded, which can also be translated noble. This nobleness required an open mind. As it says, they received the word with all readiness. This open-mindedness led them to search the Scriptures to prove whether what he said was actually true or not. So, if the things I've stated earlier in my challenges, the Sabbath God commands is to be kept on Saturday, not Sunday, Christmas and Easter are not in the Bible, the dead are asleep, if these things do not match with your current opinion, you have a chance to be close-minded and stubborn, or to be noble and fair-minded like the Bereans. I would encourage you to be a Berean. Search the Scriptures to see if what I've said is actually true. And we have many resources at lifehopeandtruth.com to help you in your search.
Verse by Verse is a companion podcast to the Daily Bible Verse blog, which you can find on the Life, Hope, and Truth Learning Center. Check out the show notes for more.